We're delighted to be joined today by three guests from the United States who I'll introduce in a moment. And just to remind you of the format, we're going to have quite an open discussion for 10 to 12 minutes. We'll have a poll and move to Q&A. So if any of you would like throughout the session to submit any questions, please use the facility at the bottom of the screen, the Q&A box, to submit those questions, and I'll put it to our guests today. Thanks very much for joining. So we have Richard Tonge, who's a principal, and Dave Maturo, managing director and SEAL at Grant Thornton U.S. And we're also joined by Ross Allen, director at the Department of International Trade. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. I'm going to keep this brief because there's three of us on here, and I know from earlier conversations we've had there's a great deal we'd love to cover. So I'll cut straight to the meat, if we may. Richard, in the US, you've 6,000 professionals at GT working across over 50 offices. So pretty good gauge of what's happening on the ground. What are you seeing at the minute?
I think if you reflect on what was shared this week from the government, the United States is still very much in a phase 1 pandemic and still very much dealing with that. And again, when you look at the United States, it's something that is being tackled really on a state-by-state basis. It's not really possible to look at the United States as a whole, much as you wouldn't, look at Europe. And I think, what we've seen with that then is, as the pandemic has unfolded, that initial kind of diagnostics and how is it going to impact businesses, going into forecasting, and a lot of actions around cost mitigation. And obviously a lot of that depends on industry, the ability to have people on site. So manufacturing, hospitality has been very different to, say, professional services and banking. And so businesses responding to that, whether it be through there's different incentives, furloughs, etc. And again, we've had a significant amount of new legislation. So if I think a lot of businesses, it's been tackling that on a US basis, understanding what reliefs are available for them, do they apply, and then working through the processes to get access to financial support. And obviously for a lot of our clients and for us as well as an organization being international, businesses are really tackling this on an international basis. So it's something that they're working across borders. They're having to navigate what's happening in the United States, and also cascade that out to dozens and dozens of countries internationally. So it's been a very challenging time, but businesses probably find themselves in different stages based on state, based on industry.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. And you're a large firm in the US, and I know part of that global network. I often hear other firms, your competitors among them, talk about delivering the firm, bringing the whole breadth and experience of the firm to bear for clients. Are you able to do that at the moment?
Yeah, I think from a suite of services, obviously that is something that we are able to do. There's been an immediate response to how it is that we can support our clients. I'd reflect as well that we're able to bring community to our clients, and I think that's critically important. The clients that we have together, the people that we have, our communities, our people, that really is the ability to bring more than just the services that we provide at a firm. And I do think we've had some really impactful examples of that at Grant Thornton.
Yeah, thanks. Dave, if I may bring you in at the moment, now you work alongside Richard and you're in a direct client-facing role. Are you seeing any practical examples of that community in action?
Absolutely. And working with Richard, I lead some of the largest relationships in our firm. And we're employing this community even in ways that we have never imagined that we would be employing it. So one example is I'm a global relationship leader for a very large private equity client. They're in the top 10 global private equity firms, just to give you a perspective. Mm. And they had reached out to us about a nursing care services organization that they have in Illinois, in Midwest-ish center part of the America, with 260 locations. And you're talking about now a high-risk population. This is nursing home facilities. And they were running out of PPE, N95 masks, face shields, gloves, gowns. And they reached out to us, to me, and we're an accounting and consultancy, right? We provide financial services. So for them to reach out about PPE we think they were really scraping the bottom of the barrel, and they in fact told us that. And just so you just imagine how powerful this large of a private equity organization is, and having to reach out to us for that PPE. So we have a network, luminaries across every industry. We're a large enough organization that we can employ those activities across the nation, across the globe. And so we reached out to our healthcare vertical, our life sciences vertical, and our manufacturing vertical to see where we can get PPE. And we reached out to those internal networks, was overwhelmed, and I say positively overwhelmed with all the response from our partners, our employees, to say, hey, we know sources here and there. We culled through them in a matter of hours. We got to 3 great sources that were very appropriate for this organization, and got them within the same day that they had reached out. We got them 3 sources, of which they leveraged 1, and it really bailed them out of a bind. So that's the power of that network, and using it in a different way.
Yeah, lovely example of a acute need. That's very, very topical. What about the mass of businesses? The mass of businesses just out there trying to navigate this, not quite so acutely affected in terms of that sort of PPE, who are sitting in February and March thinking, what the hell do I do now? What are my options? Where do I turn? What have you been doing for those people?
Sure. Well, I can tell you that there was a mad scramble in the beginning. Everyone was triaging, trying to understand how exactly is this going to impact my business? What do I need to do? And there was a little bit of stage fright. People were frozen and not knowing how to act. What we decided to do was we pulled together what we called a pandemic toolkit. And this was not a service to sell to our clients. This was, we're all in this together. We're all trying to figure this out together. So it combined external factors. So we took a look at an organization, and there was one organization that we talked to in Pennsylvania on the East Coast of the United States in a logistics business, about $2 billion, privately held business. And we took a look at external factors. What are the state demographics? Where do populations exist? What were the leading COVID trends? And how might that impact their business? And how the state governments were reacting at the time. And then we would then walk them through this tool. It was basically a survey, but we walked them through it to look at internal risk factors like cash flow, liquidity. We took a look at ratios like debt to equity, things that would mostly come right from their P&L, and some that we would pull out to help them with working capital type of conversations. How could they can handle their cost obligations with a rapid plummeting revenue line? Because a lot of businesses were impacted, let's face it. And coming out of that, we would help them to figure out where their immediate concerns were. So this $2 billion logistics business, we helped them to realize that they needed to increase their line of credit immediately, and we elevated that. We helped them to come up with a position from work from home and get in front of that and not wait for any cases to hit their location. And now we're even then using the same tool to help them with how to phase back in the work from home to return to work. Okay. And how they might remodel their offices, how they might file for the appropriate claims and capture contemporaneous information, right? So if you want to file for claims and get reimbursed for that, you got to capture the information now. So just helping them to get organized and helping them to wrap their mind around all the different facets of challenges that they're going to face. Yeah. Of course, if we could help them with any one specific area, fantastic. But the goal was, hey, let's triage, let's do this together.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. And was that led by your sort of advisory guys, or was it one of your particular service lines?
It was actually led by, we have an enterprise risk management group.
Okay.
And so if you think logically, that's exactly front and center for there, right? But then we pulled in supply chain, we pulled in cash flow and financial management, we pulled in HR services, but it was all led by enterprise risk management.
Okay. Thank you. If I may tilt the conversation a little bit now, thanks very much, Richard, and thanks, Dave. I'd like to bring Ross in now. Ross has joined us today. He's director at the Department of International Trade. Now, Ross, as I understand it, your role is about helping British businesses in the US and also US businesses which might wish to invest in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, and nice to see the Queen right behind you there today as well. Has your mandate changed this year?
Slightly, yeah. I mean, we've responded in a variety of ways. So The first key thing, we have a team of people who work in the life sciences sector, and a bit like the example that Dave gave, that team pivoted very quickly onto things like PPE, procurement, vaccine programs, things like that, and trying to link up what's happening in the UK with what's happening in the US and provide benefits to both countries there. We've also spent quite a lot of time helping businesses on both sides of the Atlantic understand the government support that's out there and access some of that. So in each direction we've been doing that. So we've been helping US investors in the UK understand the government offer there, which I think is a pretty generous offer to business. And certainly US companies have been telling us they've been really happy with the fact that they've been able to retain staff by using the furlough scheme and with some of the other sort of quite nimble responses from the Treasury in the UK. And then in this direction, we've also been helping British firms who are out here understand what's available from the federal government here, and there have been differences in the way that the US government and the UK government have approached this, and we've been trying to help businesses navigate that. And then lastly, I'd say we've sort of been reorienting the way in which we work. So our teams are fundamentally, normally a face-to-face business, and we're all about connecting British companies with American companies or American companies into the sort of UK ecosystem. We've had to find ways to do that virtually. We just ran our first sort of virtual trade mission. So normally we would fly over companies from across the UK, have them in New York for a few days, having loads and loads of really useful, sort of impactful meetings. We've had to do all of that virtually. And we're sort of learning as we go along, and we're learning from business as well. I think sometimes government can be quite slow to adjust to these things. I think some businesses have done it really rapidly, and we're trying to improve the way in which we can still get out there, connect UK and American businesses, but just do it in different ways.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Ross, conscious of time, and I've promised to pose a couple of questions directly to each of you. If I may begin by returning to Richard and Dave. Richard, Dave, on earlier episodes of BDTV, people have talked about there being a cultural shift in the way that the way that firms are both treating their employees and even in some senses in the way that competition's working in the market. Are you either of you seen that within GT?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that a lot of companies have had to make really challenging decisions over the past few months, particularly those where they've had furlough programs. I think what we have seen, however, is just a shift towards a lot of businesses that may ordinarily have had an expectation that people needed to be on site. There was a show up to the office culture. That's been obviously eroded because, what we've seen is so many businesses operate so effectively with people working from home. I think the challenges as well that have been faced across the community of employees that people have, with homeschooling issues, etc., is just a change in benefits. Employers looking at, what do I need to do to most support my employees to make this as accommodating, how can we be as accommodating as possible, and to help them be efficient. So those benefits we're seeing, additional support around tuition through the summer camps that kids might go to, certainly in New York, a lot of those aren't running. What different types of health and well-being plans can we institute to support them? So there is that shift. And then an expectation as well, as Dave referenced, not necessarily having to return to work as before. A lot of organizations recognizing that the future for them is going to be significantly more remote than it is now, and being really accommodating and welcoming of that.
Yeah. I saw some research this morning saying that 80% of people now want at least some time working remotely going forward. Very few want it to be all, but they want that. So are you actually practically arranging to look after people's children during the summer months?
No, I have my own. So I'm definitely doing okay on that one. I think it's more looking at what is out there, what kind of online programs, what kind of support can be given, what can you do? Certainly in my realm as a tax advisor, what can you do efficiently? What can you provide to your employees without incurring further increased costs? So I think it's, within the parameters of, certainly lockdowns in a lot of states and people staying at home, what can you do as an employer to support people and to recognize that different home lives have an impact on their working day too.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Richard. Now I'd like to introduce a really short poll at the moment, and I'm going to share this with each of you who are watching live. For anyone who's watching a recording of this, It's simply asking, has your view on the attractiveness of the US as a place to do business changed in the last 12 months? So I'm going to be very interested to see where people go with this. And once we've had a chance for a few of you to express your preference, I'll pass across to Ross. Now, Ross, of course, is a diplomat, so he's used to handling thorny issues like this. Ross, while asking about this, and I'm conscious that the UK is far from faultless here. The US has long been a favoured destination for ambitious UK companies, but with Trump's combative approach to international relations and trade, the high infection rates at the moment, and the stark reminders of racial injustice, is this a hard time to be doing your job?
Thank you for the question, and I'm happy to talk about that while people vote. I think, the starting point is that the US is the most popular or our most important bilateral export destination for the UK, and it's also our biggest source of inward investment. So the starting point is that it's hugely appealing, both from a trade point of view and from an investment point of view, and it matters significantly to the UK. The other thing happening in the background is that we're actually in the middle of negotiating a free trade agreement with the US. There's a lot of confidence and a lot of enthusiasm on both sides to get that done. And I think that will contribute to making it, improving the trade and investment climate in both directions. That's almost the point of a free trade agreement. And interestingly, we're doing it virtually. In the past, these things were done sort of late at night in smoke-filled rooms. Now they're done in virtual plenary sessions and sort of separate meeting rooms online. So I think the combination of the starting point of the importance of the US and the fact that the FTA should make it more attractive is pretty compelling. I think in the short run, you've obviously highlighted some challenges here, but in the run-up to that, there was obviously prolonged economic growth here, and we're certainly still seeing lots and lots of interest from UK companies in either exporting here or indeed at some point, coming out here to set up. And I know that Richard and Dave and their colleagues see a very steady stream of companies still looking in this direction, and likewise US firms are still very, very interested in the UK. I think the UK is still kind of the default go-to destination in Europe for US firms. Okay. I see we have the poll up, so I'll hand back to you.
We do. So thank you very much, and thanks Ross for that very, very measured and substantive reply. And you may be pleased actually to see the poll is saying almost 2/3 say there's no real change. There's no real change. It's a few are saying, well, it's less attractive, and a smaller number saying actually it's more attractive. So it's by no means a landslide. And is that, if I may turn, give you a moment, Ross, if I may turn to Dave as our one native American. He said, what's your first impression when you look through those results, Dave?
Well, it's certainly understandable. We're in hopefully once in a lifetime times, right? With the civil unrest, and I never thought that I would live through a pandemic in my lifetime. So, and now our numbers are going up. So it's not surprising. But I would agree with Ross. I think the partnership between the United States and the UK is a strong one, as evidenced by the trade agreement that's going on right now. We look fondly to the UK for really the bridge into Europe and to international operations. So we continue to feel affection and strength of relationship between the two countries.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, Steve. Thanks. Now, I ask this question each week, and I'm going to pose it to each of you very briefly, if we may. We're nearly eaten all our 20 minutes, and thank you. I'd love to know. Let's start with you, Dave, because you've just answered. What's been the greatest professional learning over the last 4 or 5 months?
Interesting question. And I would say in the beginning, when COVID hit, and it was a realization, okay, this is a pandemic, and businesses were going into bunker mode. I would have to admit that we didn't know what exactly to do or how to reach out and what the right context was to be sensitive to the organization, but also reaching out to help. And I think we scrambled to come up with tools and solutions. But the thing that I learned the most, and we push this nationally through the organization, is that each of our partners, our relationship leaders, we just said, just reach out, have a caring conversation. It's okay if you don't have the answers, and be transparent about that. So I reached out to literally just about every client and prospect that I had, just to say, call them up and say, oh my God, how are you dealing with this? How is this impacting your family? How is this impacting your business? And to have a caring conversation and let them know that, well, we're like you, we're dealing with it just like you. Yeah. And in that conversation came a disarming, free flow exchange of information. And invariably some things would come up with where then we could say, okay, well, by the way, I've had 10 of these conversations, and I could tell you how when this one chemical company is dealing with, keeping their staff working and avoiding COVID cases from coming in and shutting down. Yeah. And I could share that information. And so it naturally then turned us into, each one of our leaders turned us into miniature experts, because we started to have all these triage conversations.
Yes.
But it started with transparent.
Yeah.
Transparent, let's just have a caring conversation. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned.
Thank you. Thank you. Richard, may I ask you the same question?
I think as an extension of what Dave said, it's the way in which people have embraced it. I would reflect on our teams, across the country, the way that people have responded, the way they've worked, the way they've tackled it. It's been an incredibly challenging time for everybody. And the same goes to the clients that we're talking to, the ability, we've all seen our homes, we've heard each other's kids. And so I think there's been a real embracing of a really challenging time of moving into this new normal, this uncertainty that we have. And so I think the ability of people to do that and to continue to operate and to continue to move businesses forward has been incredibly impressive. And, it's something that's, I think as our firm, we're incredibly appreciative of what our people have been able to achieve through this time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Finally, Ross, may I turn to you? What for you has been the biggest learning?
But I agree with both Dave and Richard entirely on what they've said. So I'll just pick something slightly different, which is the surprisingly relative ease of still doing lots of business with existing clients. But I think the bigger challenge has been, I think this is common to other organisations, is that sort of building new relationships is much harder in this environment. So that's something we're slightly grappling with. We used to do a bit of cold calling, and we still do, but that's become a lot harder. And the lack of sort of connectivity and bumping into people at conferences and the sort of serendipitous stuff that I do a lot of in New York, just by being in New York, doesn't happen anymore. And that's still a big challenge. So in some aspects, this is going it's going well, and we're doing surprisingly well. But that is still a big difficulty.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm hearing that from a lot of firms at the moment. There's a lot they can do to mitigate it. There's a lot they can do to get close to where they were before, but that, as you say, that serendipitous, that sort of intimacy of the casual contact and conversation hasn't quite been cracked yet. Right. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. And one of the great things I've learned over the last few months is how nice it is to, to strip away any sort of geographic boundaries. It's been a real pleasure to be able to have this big conversation across the Atlantic. So thanks to the three of you for joining. I hope you have a good day, and thanks to all our listeners today. Have a good day. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe.
Thanks.